Flight 965's 2-hour delay departing Miami resulted in concerns over flight attendant crew rest requirements for the next day's return flight. The captain, in an effort to alleviate the following day's scheduling issues, requested that the first officer, who was at the controls of the aircraft, keep the speed up in the descent. 63 miles north of the Cali VOR, in the descent for the ILS approach to runway 01, Cali approach cleared Flight 965 to the Cali VOR, with instructions to descend and maintain 15,000 feet altitude and to report the Tallulah VOR. Flight 965 interpreted the clearance as being direct to Cali VOR. Although this error would have only a minor effect on the aircraft's intended flight path, the captain's subsequent action of selecting a direct-to command in the aircraft's flight management system resulted in removal of interim waypoints. The Tallulah VOR and Roseau NDB would have disappeared from the moving map on the aircraft's navigation display. As the flight descended towards 18,000 feet, Cali approach informed Flight 965 that the wind was calm and asked if the flight crew was able to perform a straight-in approach to the southbound runway 19. The flight crew acknowledged that they would have to scramble to get down, but Flight 965 accepted the offer and was cleared for the VOR DME approach to runway 19 with instructions to fly the Roseau 1 arrival and to report the Tallulah VOR. The decision to accept this approach meant the flight was now high and fast for the approach, leaving the flight crew with little time to perform critical approach tasks. Within a minute of accepting the expedited approach, a number of events occurred simultaneously which would have dire consequences. The speed brakes were extended, first to 50% and then full up in order to steepen the descent path. The speed brakes were not moved for the remainder of the flight. The Roseau 1 arrival chart was retrieved and was the subject of some confusion as the flight crew appeared to assume that this arrival would start at the Roseau NDB when in fact it started at the Tallulah VOR. Using the Flight Management System interface, the captain or the first officer selected and executed a direct course to the identifier R in the mistaken belief that R was the Roseau NDB. It is apparent that in their haste, this action was accomplished without verification of the selection's effect on the flight path. In the cockpit, the navigation display would have shown a white dashed line leading to the northeast, away from Cali and the intended approach path. What the flight crew had inadvertently selected was the Romeo NDB, located near Bogota, some 132 miles east-northeast of Cali. Both beacons had the same radio frequency and the same identifier. By executing this selection, the aircraft started a left turn toward the Romeo NDB rather than the Roseau NDB. This flight path would take the aircraft over mountainous terrain to the east. The aircraft passed the Tallulah VOR without the flight crew's knowledge and without report to Cali approach, all while the captain continued unsuccessfully to fix the flight's position with respect to the Tallulah VOR using the flight management system. Cali approach without radar coverage to pinpoint the flight's location cleared Flight 965 down to 5,000 feet. Without a formal approach briefing, there was no discussion of terrain or minimum safe altitudes, and the flight continued descending through 15,000 feet in a turn to the left until Cali approach called the flight asking for a position report. The captain responded that Flight 965 was 38 miles from Cali VOR. Below 15,000 feet, there is clear confusion in the cockpit with the first officer questioning the heading and position of the aircraft, while the captain continues to attempt to pinpoint the flight's position in relation to the Roseau 1 arrival's initial approach fix of Tallulah VOR. As the flight approached 14,000 feet, the flight crew disengages the lateral navigation mode of the autopilot and engages heading select mode. The left turn stops on a heading of 100 degrees and the aircraft starts to come to the right as the aircraft descends through 13,600 feet. As Flight 965 descends below 13,000 feet at a descent rate of 2,700 feet per minute, the confusion in the cockpit continues as the flight crew struggles to fix their position in relation to the Tallulah VOR. The captain asked the first officer to come right towards the Cali VOR. As the flight descends through 10,000 feet, the flight crew abandons plans to go to Talua and opts to proceed direct to the Rosso NDB. Since it is a moonless night, the flight crew is unaware that mountains lie directly between their position and the Rosso NDB. The rate of descent is reduced to 1,500 feet per minute. Shortly after the flight descends through 9,000 feet, the ground proximity warning system alerts the flight crew to dangerous terrain in their path. The flight crew responds by disconnecting the autopilot, selecting full power, and pulling the airplane's nose up into a high nose-up attitude. The speed brakes remain in a full-up position throughout this escape maneuver, degrading the climb performance of the aircraft. 13 seconds after the ground proximity warning is recorded on the cockpit voice recorder, the recording stops as Flight 965 hits the eastern side of a ridge near the top of El Diluvio Mountain at 8,900 feet.